listener production.
Hey, Chris Spear with you. Happy Monday and welcome to The Briefing. From AI-doctored real estate ads to discriminatory rental applications, it's a tough time to be a tenant in Australia right now, but one state's hoping to crack down on dodgy practices, putting real estate agents and landlords on notice.
In the same way that when you go to a restaurant, you don't have to go out the back and check that they've been cleaning the kitchen. You can rely on the food safety standards and the inspectors to check that the place is healthy to eat at. You should be able to do the same for renting. You should be able to move in knowing that it is already up to scratch.
That chat with one of the people pushing for change is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Cassidy. It's Monday, the 7th of July.
Hey Chris, and to you listening, Australia's government-appointed envoy to combat antisemitism is calling for mandatory training on the issue in schools and workplaces following multiple incidents in Melbourne over the weekend, including the torching of a synagogue door in the city's east on Friday. Jewish Australian businesswoman Gillian Siegel, who's been in the role since July last year, says it's needed to reduce societal ignorance towards the problem. Now, her recommendation comes after Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu urged the Albanese government to take strong action.
So far, a 34-year-old man from Western Sydney identified as Angelo Loris has been arrested and charged with endangering life over the arson attack. Police allege he poured a flammable liquid and set fire to the entrance door at an East Melbourne synagogue while around 20 people were inside. While worshippers managed to get out of the building uninjured, Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke says it doesn't mean no one was harmed.
The community here was harmed, the Jewish community in Australia was harmed, and we were harmed as a nation. There were 3 attacks that night, and none of them belonged in Australia.
Loris has faced court and's been remanded in custody. He's due to return later this month, with police still considering whether it was an act of terrorism.
Yeah, and meantime, officers are still searching for at least 5 people involved in the arson and antisemitic graffitiing of 3 cars at a Greensboro business in the city's northeast, and they're also continuing to investigate a pro-Palestine protest that turned violent when it reached an Israeli restaurant in the CBD. It's understood around 20 people, some masked and wearing Palestinian scarves, entered the restaurant on Friday night. Now, footage of the incident shows windows being smashed, tables flipped and chairs thrown as the group chanted, among other things, "Death, death to the IDF." Authorities say they haven't found a direct link between the attacks, nor a 4th incident where offensive images were spray-painted near a Holocaust museum in Elstonwick.
A Queensland zoo worker who was mauled by a big cat over the weekend has undergone surgery after reportedly losing her arm. Emergency services were called to the Darling Downs Zoo south of Toowoomba yesterday morning after a staff member was attacked by one of the animals just before the zoo's opening time.
Yeah, according to the Darling Downs Zoo, the woman in her 50s was watching one of its keepers in the carnival precinct when one of the animals grabbed her by the arm and caused severe damage. In a statement, the zoo says it's something the staff member had done many times over her 2 decades working at the zoo, and she's someone who's well versed in zoo and working with dangerous animal safety protocols. Now, police and workplace health and safety are investigating the incident, with the Darling Downs Zoo saying it will be difficult to know exactly what went wrong until they and the police can speak to the injured staff member, Chris.
Yeah, it says the animal involved will not be put down or punished in any way, with the zoo remaining closed today before reopening to the public tomorrow. The injured staff member is in a stable condition and is in hospital. Tara, I like all stories involving sharks, tigers, lions, blah, 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 blah. I hate these stories. I hate hearing these stories. They freak me out so much. But honestly, the thought that comes to the top of my mind is, well, maybe, just maybe. I know that zoos are educational and they're a place for learning and hands-on experience with kids, but maybe, just maybe, it's time we have a little rethink about them.
Look, I mean, that is what a lot of people have gotten into the comments and saying always the best place, the comment section. But look, the reality is that nothing is known yet. We don't know what happened, really. We haven't, like they said, they haven't spoken to this staff member. So it's hard to say, and it's hard to kind of cast any blame on, the staff or the zoo when we really just don't know what happened. happened, whether this is a freak accident. And it's worth noting, like, they put on their website, I have to admit, I have not visited this zoo. On their website, it says that it's a zoo that specialises in captive husbandry and breeding of critically endangered and vulnerable species. It's one that has African lions, and it's got other big cats like the Sumatran tiger, Sri Lankan leopards, and they have been there for decades. So will definitely be one to watch today and find out, what actually took place.
To the US, where emergency services are continuing to search for survivors of a catastrophic flood which tore through parts of central Texas, killing at least 67 people, including over 20 children. 11 young girls and a counsellor who were on a nearby Christian summer camp are still missing after the Guadalupe River broke its banks on the 4th of July, the country's Independence Day holiday.
Yeah, and hundreds of rescuers have been dispatched to the area after torrential rain basically caused the river to rise over 5 metres in less than 45 minutes, which is its second highest level on record, they've said. And authorities say that the rain has now started to taper off and hundreds of people have been rescued from the floodwaters so far. However, as you mentioned, there's those dozens of others, including locals, campers, and dozens of children that still haven't been found. And there was around 750 children that were actually staying at that nearby Camp Mystic, which is that Christian summer camp. Both of its owners were among those who have been killed in this flood and so far identified, as well as some young girls as young as 8 and 9, Chris.
Yeah, the US Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, and the Texas governor says the government and emergency workers are doing everything they can to find everyone who's still unaccounted for.
The number one priority now is making sure we're finding people as fast as possible and we're returning them to their families.
We're not going to stop today or tomorrow. We will stop when the job is completed. President Trump, he loves Texas for one. He's deeply concerned about all the families who've been affected.
It's shocking. They don't know the answer yet as to how many people, but it looks like some young people have died. We're working with the governor. It's a terrible thing.
Yeah, Trump has labelled this event an unimaginable tragedy, and he's confirmed that Texas will get as much funding and emergency resources as it needs. And look, sadly, the death toll is expected to rise today as authorities make their way through that flood zone.
The Australian Medical Association's calling for a crackdown on a new trend and flurry of social media content which it says is glamorising gambling. It's called out influencers, content creators and others making the videos which are knowingly reaching young audiences and seem to be making light of using pokies or often joking about addiction.
Yeah, and for context, basically some of these posts are memes or meme videos showing a famous person sitting at the pokies going, "When it's your 4th trip back from the ATM," or also showing young boys playing the pokies with the caption, "I swear I don't have a gambling addiction." Now, some of the accounts actually have the name gambling in it, and they show videos of people kind of pouring hundreds of dollars into the machines and saying they'll keep doing so until they reach a certain number of followers, which is really crazy. And then there's others that are supposedly showing a gambler turning $5 or $10, Chris, into over $150,000 in winnings. Now, we cannot say or verify that that is actually a legitimate win, but I think the point of the AMA was saying that these videos are only showing the, wins and the positive side. They're not showing any of the losses or highlighting the really problematic side of gambling.
The AMA's called the behaviour shocking given the country's known problem with gambling and also the fact that these videos appear to be targeted at younger people given the age of some of the people in them. And look, we do know that Aussies spend over $25 billion a year on legal forms of gambling, which is some of the highest figures in the world. This is something that's been discussed and is being discussed in every state and territory. It's just very interesting that we're hearing this phrase glamorizing gambling and sandwiching in influences there. It's taken a whole new front, I think.
Yeah, and it looks as though, obviously we've talked about AI and modern tech, but this is just basic social media. This is just another trend. And, we have such strict rules about what is allowed on our tellies and radio for gambling, but yet this platform, which is the most used platform by young people, the rules are supposedly there. Like Meta says, it has strict rules around content that promotes gambling and it would remove anything that doesn't comply, yet these videos are there. It's obviously not being enforced, and so I think we need to really make sure that we're keeping up with the times across every platform where this kind of stuff might spiral.
And Australia's last hope in the men and women's singles is facing off against world number 6 Novak Djokovic at Wimbledon tonight. Alex de Minaur will be hitting the court at 10:30 p.m, taking on the 7-time Wimbledon champ. And he says he's excited for the tough matchup.
It's exciting. These are the matches you want to be playing, and you don't want to go through a Grand Slam and feel like everything's been handed to you. You ultimately want to be beating the best players, and that's my focus.
And while we have some Aussies left in the doubles, we've also got some juniors still kicking around, including Leighton Hewitt's son Cruz, who overnight won his junior debut at the comp. He's Australia's top seed and will next face 11th seed Finn Oskari Paldanius.
Oh, beautiful pronunciation there, Tara.
I have family members called Oskari, so that's... Love that. Aussies versus Finns. Go, go.
Yeah, I love it. It's, again, another perfect collision of our two worlds. And look, if you do want to watch Cruz Hewitt, that matchup hasn't been announced just yet, but he does wear the same style as his dad. He has his cap on backwards and he does the cheeky come on every now and then. So it's definitely worth getting around him.
Yes, get around the Wimbledon, guys. And that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up next is my deep dive, looking into the world of real estate and all of the dodgy tactics that are going on, and the state that's trying, at least, to crack down on it. Have you ever found yourself sifting through photos of your dream property online, only to turn up for an inspection to find out you've been catfished? It is nothing like the images. You know, the ones that showed the perfectly mowed lush green lawn, but you're looking at a 6x6 dirt patch. Or the ones with the big spacious rooms to fit a queen bed and a couch, but this one could barely fit a cot. Yeah, well, thanks to Photoshop and now the world of AI, doctoring property images has become one of the most common real estate tricks of the trade. But not for long. One state is cracking down on the dodgy practice, aiming to bring in legislation that forces agents to declare when images have been manipulated, or cop a hefty fine. New South Wales Tenants Union CEO Leo Patterson Ross is one of the people that's helped push for that change, as well as calling for nationwide reform. Leo, thanks so much for joining me on the briefing today. What are some of the horror stories that you've heard of or seen when it comes to misleading ads?
This is an area where, while there's been some consumer law around misleading and deceptive conduct, really there's been no rules in place to tell people how to advertise, particularly for rentals as opposed to sales. And so some of the frustrations, some of the stories people have come to us with are talking about, a property that's been listed and the photographs have been 10, 15 years old. The property looks nothing like it did when it was freshly renovated. But recently, in the last few years, there's been this rise of the use of digital tools to put in furniture, to touch up, the lighting. And now we're starting to see pretty much fabricated properties where the grass is suddenly lush and green, the mold on the walls has been magically disappeared. And so when people see these places online in the site and they think, okay, that looks good, that it makes sense for the price, I'll go and visit it. And then they turn up and it's nothing like what they've seen. That's both a bit of a shock, a bit of a frustration, but it also has encouraged all these other people to come to the inspection. And now there's this feeling that, oh, well, it's bad, but I better still apply for it because there's clearly so many people who are interested in this place. This might be the best I can get.
And the New South Wales government wants to bring in legislation to try and make real estate agencies declare when photos have been manipulated to make the property seem more appealing. Do you think that's enough, or should they be banned from being able to do this kind of editing altogether?
So I think that the idea of putting some furniture in to give you a sense of the scale isn't necessarily a terrible thing. What is an issue is when that's misleading, and we've certainly seen that, bad editing jobs can make the room look bigger than it really is. The chair that goes in is, shrunk by 20%, 30%, and now the room looks twice as big. And you don't get floor plans on most rental listings, so you can't really judge the size of the room. So some use may be okay. and other stuff might be completely manipulative and misleading. And where that line is, I don't think we know yet. It would be safer to ban it altogether. It's a real transparency around the advertising. But as a first step, at least the owning up to what I've done, how I've tried to improve this photo, this property, is a good first step. I also think there's a question now about how effective, monitoring and compliance is going to be. A good AI job is actually hard to spot. A bad one is often laughably easy, but a really good one is hard to spot. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the department, how government tries to handle actually monitoring for the success of what we are putting in place.
And before you mention floor plans, what other types of information would you like to see, whether it be the landlords or real estate agencies, have to share about properties?
So there's a list of things that you have to declare at the moment before you sign the tenancy agreement. And I'm talking about New South Wales specifically. There's similar systems in other states as well. But I think we'd like to add in a lot more information about the property and about the management of the property that currently aren't disclosed at all. So, for instance, the repairs history of the place, whether there has been a history of mould, for instance, a history of the property and the maintenance of it, a history of compliance, if there have been complaints made, if there have been breaches.
Besides the changes that are already outlined to be included in this legislative change, do you think there is anything that the government's missed that really does need to be in this?
I think that this is a good step. We were involved in the development of this bill. I think that at the base of all of these problems is this issue that renting and finding a home is an essential service, and we don't run a competitive process around giving access to these things in other areas. So energy, water, healthcare, education, these are not competitive practices. In renting in particular, we have this very competitive process. Maybe hundreds of people are interested in a property, maybe 50 of them put in an application, and the people who are most attractive to the owner are the ones who get the property. And we really need to move away from that. Maybe it's fairer to actually have a first come, first served, and you assess the first person who comes, and if they can afford the rent, they get the property, rather than this playing people off against each other. So that's an area that we raised as a concern. This bill never promised to try and address that, but I think it would be something that's important. I think as well, the quality and the way that properties are brought to market, particularly around repairs, making sure that they are comfortable and healthy to live in. So in the same way that when you go to a restaurant, you don't have to go out the back and check that they've been cleaning the kitchen. You can rely on the food safety standards and the inspectors to check that the place is healthy to eat at. You should be able to do the same for renting. You should be able to move in knowing that it is already up to scratch.
Now, alongside Leo and the Tenants Union, the other people helping bring this legislation to life are, of course, our politicians. New South Wales Housing Minister Rose Jackson is one of them, who's seen firsthand just how hard some are finding it to try and get a home right now. Rose, there's already a cost of living crisis. We've got surging property prices, now dodgy real estate practices. It is tough out there for people just trying to secure a roof over their head. Do you think the changes in this legislation are going to be enough to actually make any difference?
Look, I think it will make a difference. Is it going to be enough to address the kind of comprehensive and profound challenge that you've described? No. It is really tough for renters out there. It is really unaffordable to find a place to rent. It's really hard. There's lots of competition in the rental market. We don't have enough rentals. So you are right that there's a real kind of compounding of issues. What we're trying to do is take them all one step at a time. And I do think these changes, which are designed to better protect renters' personal information and also give them a bit of assurance and a bit of confidence that when they look at rental properties online, that's actually what they're going to get, is improved. So is it going to fix everything? No, but I do think it will actually give renters a little bit more confidence and a little bit more assurance, and I think that's a good thing.
And you touched on it just then, but this legislation isn't just around misleading advertising. It's also got a focus around personal information that can be collected. What can you tell me about that?
Look, we estimate that there's over 150,000 pieces of personal information that is being provided weekly from prospective tenants to landlords. And people would know if you want to even apply for a rental, let alone when you're successful, you are providing so much information. And it's not just the basic personal information. People are being asked about their relationships. I've heard people ask about social media accounts, about their kids. I've heard people ask whether they have tattoos. So it can clearly be quite discriminatory at times. And we all know data security and cybersecurity is a real issue. So we're trying to really clamp down on that, be very clear in the law. Of course, you have to provide some personal information, but it really should not be beyond that kind of basic information that's needed. And we also are clarifying how that's stored and how long that's stored. So you are providing a lot of personal information, sometimes information that's entirely unnecessary, and you want a degree of confidence that that's going to be treated with the kind of security and data protection that we expect in the modern era.
Now, consumer law does have a section already that's meant to prevent this kind of thing from happening, yet it's still going on. What's the point in a fresh bill if we've already got a law?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is our current laws and, there's efforts to try and regulate this stuff have proved inadequate. And, in those circumstances where, people are finding loopholes, they're finding workarounds, well, we just got to get in there and strengthen those laws. And particularly in the relation to the use of AI and, modification of images, the technology is evolving all the time. The laws haven't kept up. So we're just wanting to make sure that in this new world where AI is omnipresent and is rearing its head in this space, our laws need to be strengthened to make sure that it's really clear to people, what they're getting when they, sign up for a rental.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully this legislation passes and can help try and make that happen. Thanks very much, Rose, for making the time to chat to me today and for joining me on the briefing.
Yeah, that's right. Indeed. Hopefully soon.
That was New South Wales Housing Minister Rose Jackson speaking with me there, and earlier Leo Patterson-Ross, CEO of the New South Wales Tenants Union. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.